Andrew, or the Mr. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, formerly known as Prince, with royal commentator Michael Cole. Hello, Michael. Good to see you.
Kevin, it's a pleasure to see you.
Under unfortunate circumstances, of course, if you happen to be Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Now, he skulked out under the cover of dark last night. The King apparently sick to death of seeing him riding his horse in Windsor Great Park, sick to death of seeing him mysteriously driving out of Windsor Great Park in his Range Rover. Where does he go? I wish I knew. So, right, you've got to go now. We're sick of it. Get yourself up to Sandringham. So he went up to Sandringham, but boy, oh boy, did he go there under a cloud. There are suggestions. People are saying, while he was trade envoy in the noughties, that he spent an inordinate amount of time with Xi Jinping in China, an inordinate amount of time with Kremlin officials, and just like, these are only allegations, of course, but just like the allegations now escalating against Peter Mandelson, Prince Andrew, or the former Prince Andrew, stands accused potentially of selling secrets to our enemies, Russia and China. This is getting very serious, Michael.
It's a very serious situation. In fact, things could hardly be more serious for the royal family. As you say, the former Prince Andrew, there riding his horse only a couple of days ago in Windsor Great Park, has been evicted from the Royal Lodge, and I heard you call it the Royal Lodge earlier, which would have pleased King George V, who always insisted that the Royal Lodge should have the definite article in front of it.
There you go.
And he's been banished to the equivalent of Outer Darkness, which is North Norfolk, where he's going to be staying at Wood Farm, where the Duke of Edinburgh, his late father, lived until his death, and quite an historic house in itself. It was the home where the lost prince, Prince George, the youngest child of King George V and Queen Mary, who was intellectually challenged throughout his life. He lived and died there as a very young man, was very rarely ever seen in public. And after that, he's apparently going to stay there until April, and then he'll move
to a slightly bigger place. Well, what do you think, Michael? You know, the King, we know, was exasperated by this horse riding and this sort of driving around in public as if he didn't have a care in the world. But also the King this morning and yesterday will have been absolutely dismayed and indeed disgusted about new revelations surrounding Prince Andrew as he was then. You know, this awful, sordid story of him and Epstein in a threesome with an exotic dancer, a stripper, who then went on to sue Epstein for $250,000, saying he hadn't paid up for her services. Andrew accused of being involved in this. And frankly, the more you see of this, the more you hear of these allegations against Andrew, I'm beginning to think, Michael, there are no depths below which this oaf Andrew will not sink.
Well, as you've said, it could hardly get worse, and yet every day, with every new revelation, it does get worse and worse.
Yes.
And the King was quite right to act as promptly as he did to strip him of all his titles, honours, stylings and ranks, and reduce him to ordinary people like you and me, who are proud to call ourselves Mr. There you see him in happier times when he's endeavouring to engage the public. I'm not sure whether the public were keen to talk to him or would be now. It is a very serious situation. The King has taken every step he could reasonably to distance himself or distance the royal family and the monarchy from his presence, and try and put a cordon sanitaire between the monarchy and the former Prince Andrew. And but he can't get away from the fact that he's his brother. There's a big age difference between them, but he's his brother, and he's been moved out of a Crown Estates property, which was the Royal Lodge, up to the Royal Estate at Sandringham, which is personally owned by the monarch, and there he will live. We don't know quite how. I'm sure he'll find some friends up there who will stay loyal to him. And I understand, Kevin, there's some extremely pleasant golf courses in North Norfolk, so perhaps they'll be
bit flat though, a bit flat, you know what I mean, but not too many hill challenges. Let me ask you.
It was Noel Coward who said very flat Norfolk.
Yeah, that's right. That was Noel Coward.
But North Norfolk is not flat.
Well, listen. Let me ask you about Sarah Ferguson. She apparently is kind of homeless. And there are some serious allegations against her as well of impropriety involving Jeffrey Epstein. And I think it's extraordinary that the day after his release from jail, after serving his sentence for child sex abuse paedophile offences, Fergie took B and Eugenie to see him for lunch. Now, people say, oh, those poor girls. Well, frankly, they were 19 and 20 at the time. I think perhaps they might have some questions to answer. But what do you think will become of the awful Sarah Ferguson?
Well, it's hard to know. Her daughters, their daughters, will obviously have got that affection for their parents. Of course, they would have. But those girls haven't been put in an easy situation. They have to live with it. It's difficult. They've got families of their own, children and so on. And it's difficult for them, extraordinarily so. And as we say, there we see them in her happier times, the two princesses, Eugenie and Beatrice. I'm sure that there's a lot going through their minds, and their mother too. You know, Kevin, in 1986, which is nearly 40 years ago, I did the first interview.
Because you were the doyen of the royal correspondence. You were, of course, the BBC's royal man. A hell of a job.
Yeah, well, that was the first interview with Anthony Carthew of ITN on the day they were engaged. And the Daily Mail said at the time, reprinted the whole of it and said it's the most revealing royal interview ever. And of course, when they became Duke and Duchess of York, which I predicted they would, and they did, they were greeted as a breath of fresh air. They were warmly welcomed. He was, of course, fairly freshly back, a couple of years, 4 years before, from the Falklands War, where he served as a helicopter pilot and put himself in harm's way, or was put in harm's way. They couldn't have been more popular. So when you see this fall from grace, it has all the elements of tragedy. But you can't say they haven't brought it upon themselves by these very, very sad things that have emerged.
Let me ask you this, Michael. As I say, as the former BBC royal correspondent, a man who knew the royal family well in those days, do you think, I mean, if these revelations about Andrew get worse, if, for example, as some people suspect, he was selling secrets to this nation's enemies, that would, these are only allegations, of course, but if they turn out to be true, that will present the royal family with an existential problem, won't it?
That's a very, very, very serious allegation, of course. I would like to think that it wasn't true. It would have to be proved. In his time as a trade representative of this country, an ambassador, if you will, he did spend a lot of time in the stands, what he called the stands, you know, Kazakhstan and other former republics, which were once part of the Soviet Union. We don't know what went on, and perhaps it requires further investigation. But I always believed that his heart was in the right place, and therefore these revelations, as they come one by one, are really that much more shocking. You wouldn't have believed that these things could possibly happen, but they have, and I'm afraid they're only the result of stupidity and
arrogance and entitlement. It really is that, Michael. Let's hope that the King navigates the royal family's way out of this mess, but it's getting worse. It's really, really upsetting, I think, but not only for the royal family, but for patriots all over this country, and I know for you too. Michael, thank you so much. Good to talk to you again.